So during that time, I lived with my grandfather, and it ended up being like almost 2 years, like between 1.5 and 2 years, and I think it was in some ways like the best 2 years of my life because we got to spend a lot of time together that I think we wouldn't have otherwise if my mom had been around, and him being like my main caretaker. So I think there's a lot of things that I learned to love because of my grandfather during that time. One of those things being like cars. He collects model cars and he has like thousands of them.
Wow.
Yeah. And I remember we used to like drive around when he had like errands to do, and just to kind of like keep me engaged or happy, he would say like, hey, if you tell me like the model of that car or like what year it's from, I'll give you like 5 pesos or whatever. So he was always kind of like challenging me in that way, and I think I just learned to love cars because of that. Not so much the mechanics of cars, because I don't know anything about that, but the aesthetics and the design, and you kind of pick up on like how Italian cars might look different from German cars, and all kinds of things like that. El niño que no nació y tu amor desamor. Frida Kahlo has been a huge influence for me as an artist, and also as a Mexican woman, definitely. I remember the first time that my grandfather took me to La Casa Azul, which is it's her home, and it is now a museum in Mexico City, and it is this beautiful, bright blue color everywhere, hence the name, the Blue House. And it was just really, really fascinating for me to walk through her house and see her objects and her studio and the things that she used to paint, and her garden, and all of these things that really, really brought to life for me her life and her work. I must have been probably, I don't know, around 8 or 9, and it definitely left a really big impression on me. I think as I got older, I started to connect more with her work, because I think most people tend to forget that Frida Kahlo was a surrealist painter. I think most of the time she just kind of gets put into like her own category, which is very fair because her work is so original and so different. I think she has a way of portraying her pain in a way that is very relatable to people and to women especially. So many of the subjects that she's depicting are about heartbreak, are about kind of battling your inner demons, and especially how to be a unique and bold and unafraid woman in a world of men, particularly in her world where she was always surrounded by very intelligent, very talented men. And so she found a way to stand out purely by focusing on her own work. I don't think she ever even intended on becoming as famous as she did. I think she was just really focused on bettering herself and becoming the best artist that she could be, and ultimately dealing with all of the pain that she suffered in her life. And I think that is a subject and a message that everyone can relate to, certainly. Have that sort of love for them in that way that he admired them. So that was one thing. but he also really got me to love horror movies. He would go to the movies on dates and such, and he would come home and recount the whole story to me with like as much details as he could, and he would make it very like
Spooky.
yeah, lively and spooky, and I was just like fascinated. Like I wanted him to tell me the story from beginning to end, and sometimes it would be like an hour, you know, like he would just try to remember as much as he could, and I wasn't scared. I was just like kind of fascinated, and I think that got me to really love storytelling on one hand, and then on the other, I do love, I think, psychological type of horror
Do you got
films.
nightmares like after you hear about that like story?
Do I what?
Nightmares.
Sometimes I would definitely, particularly when it's things about ghosts, that would sometimes give me nightmares, but it was more,
When you tell grandpa to like stop, I don't want to know anymore.
no, not even just because like I loved it so much, and it's still to this day. I know that if there are certain types of movies I'll watch, and I think I'm a very sensitive and emotional person, so it will stay with me, and I know that like I might regret it for a little bit having seen, you know, whatever movie, but at the end of the day, I feel like I'm kind of like collecting different perspectives on how storytellers, directors, or whoever it is, like tell those types of movies. So I think that's another way, and there's so many ways that my grandfather has influenced what I love. He's like the most proud Mexican man in the world. He's very, very proud of Mexican art and Mexican heritage, and I think he always feared that when I finally did come to the US, I would forget about all of that. So as a like grown older, and I go back to Mexico like every year or so to visit, and he always like sends me things on Facebook, and you know, all over the place it's like, hey, don't forget Mexico. And I think he doesn't realize, maybe I don't do a good enough job of telling him that like I could never forget, you know. And I'm here and I think about like all the things that I miss about him and that I miss about Mexico, and